you. Okay, so I know it's a bit late in the day, so before we begin, I'd like everyone to stand up and introduce themselves to someone they don't know, because I know this table knows each other, so go say hello to others. Okay, awesome. Wow, everyone's very talkative now. That's great. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let's sit down. That was great. This is like way more active than other times. Now that you've all introduced yourselves, I'm Effie and I live in Toronto, Canada. I currently work at Shopify, which I will explain a bit more about it in my next slide. Currently I do operations for our R&D team for App and Partner Platform, but in my past life still at Shopify, I was on developer relations for just over a year. So what is Shopify? Shopify is a commerce platform, so merchants use it to build their online stores, but they also use our point of sale system to run their retail stores. We have a pretty big developer community. The first set of them builds themes for our merchants. The others build apps, so they add functionality for our merchants, and generally most of them are published on our app store. And then another set do a lot of custom work for our merchants. So a big part of the developer advocate role is keeping developers in the loop for changes and upcoming work that they may need to do. So that's what we're going to focus on today, how you can classify your changes and different approaches for letting them know. So there are a bunch of types of changes. These are the three I'm going to focus on today. So the big product launches, the additional features and updates, and deprecations. This is actually in the order that your company generally cares about them, right? So you put a lot of humans and time into your new big product releases. Same goes for your additional features. These are things that your users have been asking for, and these are all very exciting. And then deprecations, I put that lower on the list because there's generally less people working on maintenance, and it takes less time. Though your developers are actually kind of looking at this upside down, right? They care about what changes impact their business. So to them, deprecations mean tons of work, right? You're breaking something potentially. Additional features and updates are great. They've probably been asking for things, and that's awesome. And then the new product launches are also nice to have. You're likely giving them additional functionality, which will help them grow their business. But generally, they care about how the changes are going to impact their business. So since there are tons of types of changes, it's really important to classify them. Some people will do like a tiering system, so they'll have like top tier, must send them like emails and post it everywhere possible. So we're going to review the different ways of doing this. On my end, I actually do it more of like a case by case rather than a tiering system, because when you're doing a tiering system, you're generally handling it case by case anyways. So the first thing that you should do is assess the types of channels that are available to you. So we all have email options. Some of us have blogs. Some of us have active social channels. A few of us, actually probably a lot of us, have Slack communities. And then of course like change logs. So the first thing to do is assess like what's available to you. The next is every time you have to, a change is upcoming, you'd have to go talk to the channel owners. It's pretty unlikely when you're in a big company that you own the blog or you own the change log. So it's important to go to them and figure out the appropriate time and if they can fit it into their schedule. So like similar to how product plans their work, and you all plan your work, as do the channel owners. So it's very important to like assume they need to know what's upcoming. So there are a couple questions that you always have to ask yourself while you're classifying your changes. The first one is, how many users does this impact? This is important, right? Because how you're going to let 10 people know of a change is very different from how you're going to let 100 people know or 100,000 people know. Then, will this create work? This is a really important one, right? We're saying that your partners or your developers, they really they want to know what impacts their business. So, will this create work for them? You have to ask yourself that. And then, will this break anything? Of course, that's very important. Always ask yourself that. So we're going to go through the types of changes, these 3 examples, in the order of importance that I think my developer community cares about them in. So the first is deprecation. So as your company grows, it's likely that you're updating your platform. What used to work 5 years ago likely won't work now, or different rules come into play. Like, for example, GDPR really changed what we were allowed to give access to. So yeah, there are 2 types of deprecations. So we'll do the update, and generally this is something that we'll do a lot of like the legwork on the back end, and then just kind of let them know. So it doesn't really break anything, but we will go through this. And the next one is like a very big one. So if we're deleting an endpoint, and this also creates work. So an update, the questions that we have to ask ourselves, right? Will this require work? So an update, my definition of it was that we do the work on our end. So it won't create work. It won't break anything. So when do you have to send them an email or changelog? When do you have to let them know? Since we're not creating work for them and we're not breaking anything, it's really low risk. So you can actually let them know after the work has been done. And again, you can send them an email or put it in your changelog. Here's an example of an email that you can send. So we do, hey Tim, we're updating the way the Orders API receives orders. All new apps will now have access to 60 days of order data. This change won't affect your current app, as you will still be able to access all order data as you do today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. The important part of this, right, is it won't affect your current app. You'll be able to access it the same way. So you're telling them, like, you should know about this, but there's no work on your end. You're fine. We grandfathered you in. The next is when you delete something. So will this require work? Yes. Will it break something? Maybe. So this is pretty high risk. You have to let them know, like, ideally as soon as you possibly can. But let's say, like, at least 30 days. And you can send them, like, this is very important. So an email, if you're like connected to them on Slack, a Slack message. If you can put notifications in your product, like if you have a partner's dashboard that you know they spend time in, you should put it there, like in the payout section, if you know that they're spending time there, just to flag it. The important things to include in your messaging would be the date. When's this happening? When is this going to impact my business? The reason for the change, like you have to remember this is a partnership, right? You want them to continue building on your platform. So if you're just telling them, hey, we removed this functionality, but you're not telling them why, then the trust is low. Like they could just close their app and go somewhere else. So it's important to tell them why you're making a change. And then ideally, you give them an alternate solution. The next is additional features and updates. So this one's exciting, right? I put in that, will it require work? Like, no, because it doesn't definitely require work. If they want to add the functionality, then sure, but you don't really, they can do it after the fact, after the change has happened, and it won't break anything. So you can tell them, again, low risk. You can tell them after. And the medium doesn't super matter. I put pretty much any of that we had. Depending on how big it is, it would have a blog post. Another thing that I do is I keep a Google spreadsheet, and every tab is a different common feature request. And on that, I'll have like the partner name, the partner email, and the date they asked me. And that way, like, it's super easy for when that feature is launched for you to just take that email and send them like an individual message. It's really important. Like, again, this job is so much relationship building that if they hear it from the blog before they hear it from you, even though they've asked you for it 10 times, that's not a great experience, right? And this one's a big one, right? What if you're implementing a change that replaces something they already do? So generally, we like to build what most people need most of the time. And of course that changes. And there's always a risk if you're building on top of a platform that the company will start building these features internal. So this is like a tricky subject, right? You're impacting their business a lot. You may be taking some of their customers. So you have to tread really lightly. So this one is, will this require some work? It could. Will this break something? Maybe. Like, again, they can continue to, it depends on the thing, because in this case, we're not deprecating anything, you're just building it internally. It's nice to, or I like to think about it as you're really not really removing opportunity, because again, we're building what most people need most of the time, but we'll never get to the 100% of what people need. So that's really why your developer community is there. Ideally, you tell them this before. In some cases, obviously you can't. If you're like a publicly traded company and you're not able to share this earlier, but ideally you can tell them as soon as possible, if not like right when you're launching it. And then this one's important. This is a one-to-one for sure. So you either like email them, most likely you get on a phone call with them, like you treat this very lightly. You tread very lightly. Don't treat this lightly. This is important. The next is a new big product launch. So there's kind of two big product launches. The first one is like brand new features. Never happened before, which really means that you're just giving your developers likely more endpoints, more options. And the next is like if you're updating a marketplace. So they do require work. It's a new feature for you. It's like probably a big launch, but they require work. So the first one is pretty low, like they don't even know what's happening. You don't need to let them know in advance. And you let them know when it's complete. This one's most likely gonna be like a blog post and a social post. All of the posts, because it's a really big launch and a lot of your team's working on it. The next is an update. So in this example, we're using like an update on your marketplace. This one will require work and it might break something. So if they don't, in the marketplace example, update like their listing by the deadline, then it's likely that they're not going to be published on the new marketplace. And then that's ruining all of their top of funnel. So it could break something. This one, you should let them know as soon as you can. Again, there are restrictions to that in most cases. So at least 30 days in advance so that they have time to update. And this one is, again, very similar to like when you're deprecating something. You should let them know in like every possible way. But again, this one is not really something you're like gonna publicly say. So you'd like email them, Slack them, a notification in your product. And the important things to include in this messaging is the date, when is this changing? The reason for the change, this can be a bit vague, again, because if you're a bigger company and this is a big launch, you're likely not gonna tell them like exactly what's happening. In most cases, especially in like Shopify's case, the developer community is quite strong, so people tend to figure it out anyways, but not from the email, like they know what's happening based on the change you're asking. The next is like what exactly they need to do on their end, and you should be like super explicit, like if this doesn't happen, this is what's happening, and mindful of like the amount of work that they need to put in. So in all the examples we were going through, the different mediums that you could use or the channels. So what if email doesn't work, right? Like for the show of hands, how many of you actually read every email that comes into your inbox? Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. We just spent the last 15 minutes trying to decide what updates users should know. And some of them impact their businesses, but others are just good to know, right? So we have to differentiate what's important because our inboxes won't. So some options instead of using email that we use now is we put it in our product, but that's because we have our partner dashboard that people need to log into to see their payouts. So we know that they're spending time there. Also like Slack, if any of you have other options, please let me know. So users care about changes that impact their business. You must differentiate between what's important because our inboxes won't. Thank you.